Welcome to the Midnight Narrator, where the shadows of the past meet the whispers of fate. Tonight's gripping tale, The Watchful Librarian, uncovers the dark corners of online connections and the silent hero who changed everything. In a world where trust can be deceiving and despair often blinds, one moment of bravery reveals the power of listening, intuition, and hope. Ready to step into the story? When I was 13 and naive, like many 13-year-olds, I spent considerable time on a now-defunct online platform called ConnectMe. It functioned similarly to a less sophisticated version of modern social platforms, allowing users to interact with strangers through public forums or private messages. For context, I was a troubled youth. I grew up in a chaotic home with largely neglectful parents and endured significant bullying throughout middle school. I found refuge in a ConnectMe forum called Style Central, a place for discussing fashion and aesthetic trends of the early 2010s. It was intended for users aged 13 to 18, but with hindsight, I suspect many participants were much older men. Through the forum, I connected with a 17-year-old named Kale. I don't recall his ConnectMe handle, but I remember him being a kind and engaging presence. We communicated almost daily for 2 years, and he became a close confidant. Starting when I entered high school at 14, the bullying intensified, as did the turmoil at home. Though I never received a formal diagnosis, I believe I was experiencing depression. I began having suicidal thoughts, which I confided in Kyle. He responded with understanding. I get it. The world can be overwhelming. I have similar thoughts sometimes. Unlike my school counselor and others I'd told, Kyle didn't dismiss my feelings with empty reassurances. His candor felt strangely comforting. "You're still young," he messaged me once. "Maybe give it some time. See if things improve. If not, we can talk more." I followed his advice, hoping for improvement, but the situation only worsened. By 15, I had dropped out of school, rarely left my room, and struggled with basic self-care. When I described my deteriorating condition to Kale, he revealed, "I haven't been doing well either. I acquired some sleeping pills a while ago. I'm just waiting for the right moment." This surprised me. Kale had always seemed upbeat. After considering his words and researching the pills he mentioned, I asked if I could obtain some from him, just in case. He agreed. I suggested he mail them, but I was surprised to learn we lived in the same state. Unwilling to share my address, the only sensible decision I made during this period, we agreed to meet in a public location, a library an hour from my home. A few weeks later, I took the bus to the library. Using the profile pictures he'd posted on Style Central as a guide, I searched for him, but no one matched his online image. I waited, assuming he was late, until someone called my name from a nearby study carrel. I turned to the source of the voice. It had to be Kale. No one else knew my name. But he looked different. He was taller and broader than his photo suggested and noticeably older. It was difficult to pinpoint his age, but he was certainly not 19. I approached him and confirmed his name and ConnectMe handle. He offered a friendly smile as I sat across from him. He wasn't unattractive, and he seemed to have made an effort for our meeting, but the discrepancy between his perceived and actual age was unsettling. A cold dread began to creep into my heart. Before we could speak, a librarian approached us. Her name was Anya, a young woman, perhaps 22. She inquired if we needed assistance, an unusual occurrence in a self-service library. She took our brief requests and then lingered, her smile strained, her eyes filled with a quiet concern. "Everything all right here?" Anya asked, looking directly at me. I assured her everything was fine, forcing a smile. Inside, I felt a desperate urge to confide in her, but I was too ashamed, too convinced that no one could understand the darkness that had consumed me. Kale shifted uncomfortably in his seat, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. I assured her everything was fine, and she reluctantly returned to her desk, but I could feel her gaze on us. Kale and I finished our tasks in awkward silence. I avoided direct eye contact. He wasn't unpleasant to look at, but his eyes seemed strangely vacant, as if they lacked depth. After we finished, and Kyle still hadn't mentioned the pills, I brought up the subject. "They're in my vehicle," he replied. He leaned closer and lowered his voice, winking in a way that felt unsettling, a predatory gleam in his eyes. It wouldn't be wise to exchange them here. They're just sleeping pills, I told myself. It's just a way out. But a small voice whispered inside me that it was more than that. It seemed logical, so we left the library. The parking lot was busy, not an ideal location for anything suspicious, so I didn't hesitate to walk with him. But when we reached the far end of the lot, and Kyle continued walking, I hesitated. I'm parked further down the street, he explained when I questioned him. He gave a dismissive chuckle as if I'd asked a foolish question. I can't just give you pills in front of everyone. I stopped. I realized I didn't know this person as well as I thought, and I didn't want to be alone with him in a secluded area. But then again, did I care what happened to me? Wasn't I ready to end it all anyway? The thought warred with a primal instinct for self-preservation, a tiny spark of hope that refused to be extinguished. Cale noticed I'd stopped. He turned back and placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. Even in the daylight, his eyes seemed unusually dark. Come on, he said roughly, guiding me away from the parking lot. It was then that I realized, despite my despair, I still valued my life. I didn't want to be harmed. I didn't want to die. I raised my arm, trying to remove his hand, but his grip tightened, painfully. I feared the worst when a shout from behind startled us both. Hey, stop right there! I turned towards the parking lot and saw the librarian Anya running towards us. Stop! Anya was small in stature, and Cale could have easily overpowered her, but her voice was loud and commanding, attracting attention. Realizing we were being watched, he released my shoulder and fled. Anya reached me, taking my hand and leading me back towards the growing group of onlookers. Once we were safe, she called the authorities, who arrived quickly. After hearing my story, they took me to the station for questioning. Anya accompanied me, which was a great comfort. In short, the man I met was not a 17-year-old named Cale, but a 39-year-old named Jonas Vance, identified through photos Anya had discreetly taken at the library. He was apprehended the next day. In his apartment, the authorities discovered evidence linking him to other missing persons, all of whom had confided in him online about their struggles with mental health. The experience was a turning point for me. I returned to school and focused on my studies. I graduated a year later with excellent grades. At 16, I began seeing a therapist, and with their support and guidance from school counselors, I was placed with a foster family who eventually adopted me. I now value my life, and I owe my well-being to a brave librarian. We still stay in touch, and she is also doing well, now a head librarian at a bigger branch. We sometimes talk about that day, and she always says the same thing. I just had a feeling. Thanks, Anya, for looking out for a lost kid who didn't understand the danger they were in. Now that I'm older and wiser, I strive to do the same. And that's the conclusion of The Watchful Librarian, a story of danger, resilience, and the quiet strength of a stranger who became a savior. It's a stark reminder that even in the darkest times, a single act of courage can light the way. If tonight's story inspired or moved you, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more powerful narratives. Until next time, remember, in a world full of noise, sometimes the ones who notice the quiet are the ones who save lives. This is the Midnight Narrator, and we'll see you in the shadows.